Welcome back to Red Cross Radio here on KQV News Radio 1410 AM. We're talking about the Service to the Armed Forces program at the American Red Cross today, specifically the Service to the Armed Forces program at the American Red Cross Southwestern Pennsylvania chapter, which is Pittsburgh and the surrounding area. And our next guest joining us is Caitlin Norris. Caitlin is a volunteer with the Red Cross. Welcome, Caitlin.
Hi, thank you.
Sure, thanks for joining us. So tell me a little bit about what your specific volunteer role is with the Red Cross and how you got involved.
Well, great. I work at the chapter as an intern volunteering, but I also I take the calls during the day that come in, and then I also normally pick up a couple months or a couple nights a month for overnight coverage for SAF calls.
So these are the calls that are coming from local military families with an emergency, such as maybe a birth or a death or an illness of a family member, and then you take that call and you try to relay that message to someone in the military often serving abroad, or is it just abroad, or is it also servicemen and women stationed here in the United States?
It's actually both. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we get are for service members abroad. But we also do get calls for people that are stationed elsewhere in the United States. It used to be that the Red Cross, we were the primary way that people could notify their loved ones, that because most of the time, 10, 20 years ago, if you were in the military, there wasn't the communication that there is now. But now they still have to come to us because in order to get leave, they have to have a verification from the Red Cross. So a lot of times the loved one that is in the military already knows about whatever has happened, the death or the illness, but we still have to serve as the verification for the military.
So if you could take me through step by step what happens when you get a call. Let's say today a call comes in from someone who maybe had a death in the family and they need to notify someone in Iraq. What would be the various steps you take in that process?
Okay, well, if it happened, we'll take our volunteers most of the time handle after hours calls. So what would happen is the family would call and they would get our answering service, and the answering service would take their name and their number, and the answering service would then contact whatever volunteer is on call that night, and the volunteer would call back the family, and we would have to get all of the service members' information. We would have to get all of the information about whoever it is that is ill, mother, father, grandparent, whoever it may be. And then after that, the Red Cross volunteer has to contact the doctor or the hospital, wherever the injured person is at, and we will have to verify with the doctor or a nurse. We have our list of exact things that the military wants to know, their condition, that sort of thing. And then after that, we'll input it. We'll either call our service station that is in Washington, D.C., or we will put it in online, and the case will be formatted and sent off to wherever that person is stationed at, Afghanistan, Iraq, or stateside. And then at that point, the message will be sent to the Red Cross station wherever that service member is stationed, and they will relay the message to command and then to the service member. And usually we put in the messages that we'd like the service member to contact the family so that the family is sure that they received the message and they can be informed of any leave plans that they have.
So you said a lot of these calls will come in off hours, so it's not just a 9 to 5 thing. You might feel a call at 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning. So is it difficult at that time of night to get in touch with the people you need to get in touch with?
Generally not. It depends. Normally these are emergencies, so it's, whoever's involved that we need to talk to get information from. Generally, the hospital, there's always someone that can talk to you. We don't have a problem getting in touch with the people we need to talk to. It can be, difficult for volunteers sometimes because most of our volunteers work full-time jobs, and they, at 2 o'clock in the morning, that's kind of difficult sometimes for the volunteers to be able to, especially when, there are nights when we don't get any calls, and then there are other nights when we get, 5 or 6 calls in one night. So
wow. So, and if you're getting 5 or 6 calls in one night and you happen to be the volunteer on call that night, you're handling all of those all by yourself?
Yep, generally. I mean, Pauline's always there as the backup in case things get too out of control. But generally, it's one volunteer on. Sometimes when people initially start volunteering with us, they are on as trainees. And so sometimes there'll be a trainee that they'll be training the person that's on call. But yeah, generally it's whoever's on call that night handles everything.
So on average, how long does it take once you get that initial call to do all the steps that you need to do until you've kind of wrapped up your work for that night?
Well, a really straightforward call where the family member has all of the information that they need, and that we can get in touch with the doctor's office and be able to get exactly what we need. That could take, as little time as, a half an hour to put everything in from start to finish. That is until it is sent off to be sent off elsewhere, our part of it. But sometimes, you can't get in touch with a doctor or a nurse, and you have to wait for them to call you back, and that could take, more time, much more time.
Right, right. Well, this is very noble that, volunteers like yourself who aren't getting paid but are doing this purely out of the goodness of their heart are willing to devote so much time to help these local families communicate and get these important messages to their loved ones overseas. Now, do you ever talk to the military person yourself, or you talk only to the local family?
Generally, it's only the local family, but we always say we have 3 clients we're serving. We're serving the family, we're serving the service member, and we're serving the military. Those are our 3 clients. So even though we don't generally talk to the service member, sometimes the service member, if they come home and they need a leave extension, they'll then call us, and we are in charge of doing that too. But generally, it's just the family.
But overseas, the Red Cross representatives in Afghanistan or in Iraq are dealing face-to-face or over the phone with the military there. Mm-hmm. And so I imagine at times you're dealing with very emotional situations, and especially if you're dealing with a case of a death or an illness. So is that I guess I'm just asking to talk about that. How do you handle that? Does it take a kind of a special hand to be extra sensitive to someone who might be going through a really difficult time?
Yeah, that's one of the things that is difficult about being a volunteer for the SAF program. Generally when people are calling, it's not a good thing. Occasionally we'll get birth announcements, which we're always happy to do because those are fun things to do.
Right.
It's good news. But generally, it's about a death or an illness, and the family members are under a lot of stress, and they're under a lot more stress because their loved one is overseas. But that's kind of, as with anything, I think that's one of the more rewarding things, is to know that this one thing on their list of a million things to do, we can make really easy for them, and we can handle it completely for them. And a lot of times, that's one of the best parts, is when at the end of it, someone says to you, thank you for making this so easy and handling this. That's a nice feeling. So.
Right. That does sound quite rewarding. And so what kind of training is involved? If anyone listening is interested in becoming Service to the Armed Forces volunteer, what kind of training did you go through, Caitlin?
Well, generally, if you call our office, we'll send you kind of like a self-study where you can read through and kind of get a basic idea of what we do, and then you come in for a one-on-one kind of session with Pauline or myself or whoever may be in at the time, and kind of go through. We have our big binder of everything SAF, and you go through, and we'll put you through the process, and then the first couple of weeks or months or however long that you are on volunteering, you're on as a trainee, like I mentioned earlier, and you've always got an experienced caseworker that's on with you to kind of work you through your first couple of cases. Right.
Well, thank you for joining us, Caitlin. It sounds like some really rewarding work you're doing, and on behalf of the community and the local military families here, thanks for your volunteer work. It sounds like you do some great things. Appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
We're going to take a break. Thanks for joining us here on Red Cross Radio on KQV News Radio AM